I'm building agents that are like 1/10 the cost of what it costs to run it on an LLM, and they perform at least as good, if not much better. So I think that's going to be the future of AI. I think as Bitcoiners, it behooves you to keep an eye on AI, because not only is it an incredible opportunity, it's an incredible threat as well. They call it shooting from the hip. You're going to take a risk and try to figure out a way to create value, find your fortune. Bitcoin is almost like a manifestation of that in cyberspace, is this totally new space that is not crowded yet, but where you can get your underpriced sats, you can get your underpriced claim to cyberspace. You got to fight for it every day, just like you fight for anything else every day. I think it's inevitable because we will fight and because it's worth fighting for, but it's not inevitable inherently. It's just code that runs out there, and if nobody decides to run it, you got to marry hard work with prudence, because it's like I could drive a Ferrari real fast, but if I drive it into a bridge abutment, then it's worthless, right? If I drive it in the correct direction, it's worth a lot more. Yeah, you're back in the routine. It makes sense. I mean, you're the hardest working man in Bitcoin, dude. You're always putting out content.
I don't think I'm the hardest working man. It's so interesting because, and maybe we can start with that in the podcast directly, because I think there are way harder working people in Bitcoin. I just think I make it very public, all the work that I'm doing. And that's why I think people have this notion that I'm very hardworking. But I've met some really great Bitcoiners that work super hard. And I'm like, I don't think I can really compete with them. Also, it's like objective. It's subjective how you measure hard work, because an Indian manufacturing fabric guy might work harder than Elon Musk, but Elon Musk has a lot of more output that he puts into the world. So it's like, how do you work hard work? Like, is it just the hours? This is
one of my core values. I've talked about this a lot with friends that are entrepreneurs. It's like, you got to marry hard work with prudence, because it's like I could drive a Ferrari real fast, but if I drive it into a bridge abutment, then it's worthless, right? If I drive it in the correct direction, it's worth a lot more. So that's kind of what you're talking about, is leverage and prudence and understanding where to push. And, it's almost like judo. Like, you got to understand like how to use the leverage versus just coming right at it and trying to use all strength.
And there's both sides. And it actually ties nicely into Bitcoin, because I sometimes see Bitcoiners on the one hand saying, oh, we have a low time preference, and so it's okay to slack off a little bit. And that's fine. It's totally fine. But then I'm like, yeah, but we also have a proof of work mindset. We also want to put in the pudding and just not do a little bit. And so I think there's a healthy balance there. I probably tend more towards being more on the hustle side, more on the proof of work side, however you want to call it. And I definitely need my girlfriend to tell me, hey, let's take a holiday. let's have some relaxing days in there, so that if I'm alone, I just constantly work. I don't do anything else than working. I really love it also. But there's a good thing into relaxing. But I have seen Bitcoiner taking this low time preference mindset as an excuse to just not do anything. And I'm like, that's not what low time preference means.
Yeah, you need both. I mean, for me, I relate to you. You just want to work almost every day. But there's value in relaxing and backing off. And, back to what you're saying, you could relate it back to Bitcoin. There's a lot of people that probably worked a lot harder than Bitcoiners in the 2010s, but they're never going to have as much Bitcoin, right? That's just the truth. And part of that is, where you happen to be at the time, but a lot of it is prudence, right? They made the right choice to buy Bitcoin, and they stuck to it, and that paid off. So, where else is that happening in your life? Where else are you misapplying your effort, and where are you killing yourself when you could just kind of apply, work smarter instead of harder? So I think about that a lot. And I also just think about lean into your personality. If you're the workhorse, then lean into it. Just use it to your advantage. If you like working, use it to your advantage. Other people aren't like that. Some people are more Zen mindset. And it's I always think about, one of the sayings my dad would say growing up is, you need two of every kind of animal. Otherwise it's a boring zoo. So there's all different kinds of people. You got to lean into your personality. You got to appreciate the people around you with different personalities, you know?
I get so much satisfaction from providing. For example, with my three freelancers that work now almost like basically every single day with me. So we are just like it's a freelance relationship, but it's almost like within a company, within an employmentship. Honestly, like it's more of a team, not just like a freelancing thing. Freelancing thing is more for for legal stuff. And I get so much satisfaction that I could create something where I have work where I can pay someone from the profits that I make and actually facilitate this role and this job. I get so much satisfaction if I earn money and can pay for a meal for my friends and for my girlfriend and for my family. Like I don't know what it is.
It's primal. It's primal. You know, that's what men are kind of meant to do. And but tying it back into your just, sitting back mindset, I think there's a balance. And I think, there's seasons to life. Everybody's different, but I also agree with you. It's like, I think sitting back and doing nothing is probably a bad move. If you're under 50, especially, it's like, find some way to give back, especially if you're, sitting on a big stack. That's the way I look at it. That's my mindset going out there. Like, I'm going to go waiter and I'm going to go volunteer, coach wrestling because I love wrestling and I love giving back. And I think that's critical. There's a lot of religions that look at it this way, and that's the way I look at it.
How do you see actually this those mindsets, those values, those primal character traits also combined with this famous American freedom, American values, and how much also are those tying into with Bitcoin, and maybe even are they more into Bitcoin than they're currently in the United States?
Yeah, so you're just stating how does freedom interrelate with Bitcoin and like primal instincts? I mean, I think especially for men, right? It doesn't feel good to be dominated. It doesn't feel good for anyone to be at the mercy of somebody else, right? And so that's kind of the way we've designed the entire planet after central banking. And if you go and look, how does it relate to America? A lot of American culture and the at least the idealism and fantasies about America come from the Gilded Age, which was a time where towns like I'm in Texas were outposts, and you were kind of on your own. And the old saying was, "Go west, young man." You had to figure out, everything was crowded. You were going to compete. You're either going to stay here and compete and have to deal with people, establish families from a long time ago, or you're going to go west and take a risk and shoot. They call it shooting from the hip. You're going to take a risk and try to figure out a way to create value, find your fortune, find your 10 acres out in the country and make the best of it. So Bitcoin is almost like a manifestation of that in cyberspace. Is this totally new space that is not crowded yet, but where you can get your underpriced sats, you can get your underpriced claim to cyberspace. A lot of the ways I think of Bitcoin addresses is almost like your domain. UTXOs are like your domain, and your private key is like the magical ownership, the magical like dominion. What I want to say, like shibboleth that you say to like control that domain in cyberspace. So you apply it that way, there is nothing more American than Bitcoin.
Maybe Bitcoin is even more American than America currently. I don't know. Like,
I mean, probably. I mean, truthfully, I think a lot of America has been infiltrated by Marxist stuff, and that's obvious by the way that they talk in academia. But they're what everyone hates on McCarthyism. McCarthy was this senator that was like crazy about communism, and maybe he went too far. I don't know. But the truth is, like, there was a communist plot to, infiltrate the United States, and it makes sense from a geopolitical perspective. I mean, you really think the Russians were just sitting back doing nothing? Like, America was a threat to them, so they tried to address that through espionage, and it was smart of them to do that. But at the same time, you got to realize, like, those ideological ties probably never went away. And so, there's this concept of the Fabian Society. The Fabian Society is a British Socialist Society, and their logo, the word Fabian comes from a Roman general that just won by attrition, just wearing down the enemy, and their logo is a wolf in sheep's clothing, and so they're literally, posing as though they're not communists, they don't have this agenda, but slowly working to change the culture to be more amenable to socialism.
That's so interesting. I think a lot about what values Bitcoin brings. So like for me, and I always have those three main pillars of Bitcoin. I have the wealth pillar. So you and the world gets richer by adopting Bitcoin, and all the companies and all, like everyone that adopts Bitcoin. Then there's the second pillar that's kind of the foundational pillar of all of it, is the freedom aspect of being able to run your own node to verify it, being able to sign your own transactions with just having your own keys. And then the third pillar is actually the interesting one for me, is the community, the culture one, the community one, the mindset one, the values one, where you always have those culture wars within Bitcoin. You have this, but even though there's like cultural wars in there, for example, there are people that are completely on the raw vegan diet. There are people that are just eating meat. And then it's like, yeah, like there's not like one line, but they're all unified within Bitcoin, and they all like fresh food over processed food. They all like more organic stuff. Like there is this weird thing where Bitcoin is already so big and has so many different thinking people in them, and still we're all unified and kind of working towards the same goal. So I find it super fascinating to talk with people. And I had so many guests on, and most guests are wanting to be father or mother. Most guests are very religious, even though I'm not that much, and I get to be more religious with the podcast. I'm on my own journey there. And it's just so interesting for me to see the third side of Bitcoin. So like most people are interested in the money go up, like seeing like, oh, like when I get to 0.1 Bitcoin, how many houses will I able to buy? That's fun. And like, I get that. And this is also what got me attracted. Then there's like the second kind of phase of like, hey, I want to transact money and nobody can stop me. And like, I want to receive money and nobody can stop me. I want to just push money around the world and nobody can stop me. But for me, I'm just obsessed with the third pillar of like the culture and the meetup thing. And that's just fascinating for me, how the values within Bitcoin are formed. And then for me, it's also interesting, will those values be transformed onto the world? And will Bitcoin actually have an impact, not just on our money, but also on our values, on how we live together and how we interact with each other?
Yeah, for me, just from a personal standpoint, I think this is common among Bitcoiners is, one quote from The Matrix that really stuck out with me. I'm not sure exactly how Morpheus says it, but he says, you always knew there was something wrong, but you couldn't, it was just at the tip of your tongue. You could always feel it, but you couldn't explain what it is. And he's talking about the Matrix, being a broken fake world. And I think a lot of us experience that, myself included. And I think when you meet other people that have escaped that and you realize that maybe you are a freak, but the world's broken. Maybe you're not broken. Like that's actually very therapeutic. I think so. I think that's where a lot of the community comes from. And then additionally, you just have, Bitcoin just rewards you for being a contrarian and just saying, yes, you were all wrong. Yes, like I am going to just buy Bitcoin. I am going to live this way. And so that opens the door to a lot of other great personal growth and rejection of just credentialism in the form of health, and so you're talking about carnivore. Personally, like I love the Ray Peat stuff, which is a little bit different, but kind of I think it extracts the best parts of carnivore and also expands it to metabolic health. And I've had since the last time we've talked, I've had a huge change in my energy levels and my enthusiasm for life just because of what I've discovered there. And so I would have never discovered that if it wasn't for Bitcoin and for Nostr, because there are a lot of people on the Peatster hashtag talking about this stuff. I was doing carnivore stuff and not realizing that, it's better than the normie diet, but it's definitely incomplete. And for me, I found a much better way to do things. And so that you're right. Like that's the beauty of Bitcoin is it kind of rewards contrarianism and gives people low time preference to explore these other areas that are not are not well explored enough, and also fighting against antinatalism, like a lot of the other trends that you're talking about, where the world's telling you one thing, but it's ultimately not good for you.
I have the quote here, and I think it's an amazing one. Actually,
You found it?
I found it. Gemini found it. I shouldn't take credit for that. I hope I found it. You are here because you know something. What you know, you can't explain, but you feel it. You've felt it your entire life, that there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's here. But it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. I love that. And I think we really should highlight that, because I can think like this relates so much to Bitcoin for me.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, I'm curious to hear your experience. Like, personally, I always knew the fiat rat race was a trap. I could have gone the corporate route. I had tons of people trying to push me in that direction. I had my parents getting all pissed off at me for not going to grad school. I didn't want to, because I wanted to learn on the job, learn entrepreneurial skills, learn practical skills, work my ass off in my 20s to build up a skill set, and also go home and try to experiment with entrepreneurship. And that's basically what I've been doing since the day I graduated about 10 years ago. So, and that's benefited me in numerous ways. And probably the most of which is just how it's been radically humbling, and radically like opening my mind. And I don't think I would have been ready for Bitcoin if it wasn't for that experience. And kind of seeing through the rat race, understanding that it's broken, but at the same time feeling a little bit of despair because you don't have a lot of people around you that are kind of validating those types of decisions. A very lonely road. And then you meet a bunch of Bitcoiners that are like, oh yeah, I agree. Like this whole system's corrupt. Come with us, and that's a relief when you meet people like that. I'm curious what your experience was like.
Very much like that. I feel, I mean, that gets almost spiritual here, but it's almost like a being at home feeling. If I go to a Bitcoin conference, this is truly my happy place, like also the podcast, and just speaking with people that are like-minded. And there is some degree of comfort zone and being in a bubble that isn't good. So I purposely have friends that I really enjoy and really like that are very much outside of that. They don't like Bitcoin. They are very much against it. They're getting fewer and fewer because they are self-selecting kind of. But there are some few friends that I have from very early on, and I've met with them just a couple of weeks ago. And it's interesting to see the mind. And I think almost everyone that listens to the show that listened to the show multiple times knows I have an extremely open mind, and I like to hear ideas that I don't agree with. Like, I really enjoy that because it really opens my mind. That's how I came to Bitcoin, because I was thinking that Bitcoin is a scam. And so only because I listened to opinions that I really hated, because it didn't confirm my bias, only that's why I'm here. And so now I'm still trying really hard to always keep that in mind, being now so deep into Bitcoin that if someone tells me, oh, it's great to have inflation, I really want to hear them out, even though I know it's BS. But I think it's important to never get stubborn and just blind other people out.
Yeah, I love this conversation because it feels like kind of the theme is almost paradox. We're talking about hard work versus smart work, relaxation versus working hard, etc. And now we're kind of talking about like listening to Bitcoiners versus listening to the rest of the world. And I think there's balance. I think when we first come in, we're used to listening to the rest of the world. We're used to being told that we're defective in some way or messed up, and it's refreshing to find your in group. And then, as you point out, I think there's immense danger in just staying and echo chamber, because I do think there's a myopia, there's a narrow mindedness, narrow sightedness that can happen if you're not aware of that. So yeah, maintain your relationships with normal people. Try to make friends outside of Bitcoin, and get some pushback. And I would say regarding Bitcoin, a lot of their pushback is pretty invalid. It's at least been proven to be so. When it comes to other things, there's probably like a lot of baggage you bring with you in Bitcoin that maybe distorts your perception in other areas. So maybe listen to them a little bit more when it comes to things that aren't Bitcoin. But I think it's healthy. What you're describing is to kind of go through that wave of being behind enemy lines all the time, finding your people, then hang out with your people too much, realizing that you're kind of losing touch, and then going back. So it's a constant balance and a constant correction, which is probably healthy.
Yeah. And shutting us, Jordan Peterson talks so great about that. He talks about the same thing of like being single versus being in a relationship and marriage. Is like, it's so hard to be in a marriage, so hard to be in a relationship. But you will go insane if you are alone too long. And if you're never getting tested, if you never have someone that spares with you. I mean, you also have friends, all sort of things, but if you shut yourself from the world in a small corner, it's just a matter of time that you completely go insane and lose touch, kind of. And probably the Bitcoin community is probably the best community to lose yourself in, because they are extremely challenging. It's very rare. And I've been in the IT security community, I've been in the political communities in Austria, I've been in many different communities, and I've never seen it in any community. And I'm upset and fascinated by that. There's not another single community where even if you talk something for Bitcoin, people will still challenge you. If someone says, "Oh, at a Bitcoin meetup, I think that's so bad," like this, something that just confirms the Bitcoin bias. There's one guy asking why. So the thing is, people don't just blindly accept your opinion, even if they like it. They ask why and want to go deeper and want to know how you got there. And this is something I've never experienced in any other community, where people are so critically thinking about things that they're even questioning if it confirms their bias, because they want to know more. They're curious. And I talked with that also with a fellow Bitcoiner that also has a podcast, in a German one in Austria, Nico. And he talked about that, where there are many Bitcoin books. There are now more and more Bitcoin podcasts, even though I think we need more books and more podcasts. But there are many already. So you could basically watch every day 1, 2, 3 podcasts, and you probably have still like new
40
content
hours
that
per
comes
week.
in.
You gotta get your 40 hours per week.
40 hours per week in, and you can just go so deep in there. And people in Bitcoin actually do that because they're actually so curious, and I find that fascinating. I was planning to start a podcast completely on a different note, but I find it fascinating talking about the culture and the community aspect. It's probably just the two of us that find it interesting. So thank you so much for people that stick around for that.
Yeah, man.
You talked about this FinCEN guidelines. I have never heard about that before. You just brought it up to me. And you said it's something that you're very worried about from a regulation standpoint for the United States, which I find interesting, because all I hear till now actually is that Biden was so bad. Trump, from a regulation standpoint, is now so much better. And they're very happy that Trump is now there, and all the bad things kind of get rewinded now a little bit. What is the FinCEN guidelines, and how do you kind of see the regulations on Bitcoin the past couple of months since Trump also is there?
Yeah, so for those of you that don't know, FinCEN, it's like I think it's like almost like law enforcement for the Treasury. So So we have, we have the executive, we have the treasury. So that's the president, and then the treasury falls under him. Scott Bessent is our treasury director. And then you have FinCEN, which is sort of like a law enforcement angle on the treasury, and so they have a lot of power, and they have a lot of bureaucracy that's just entrenched. And so I think this new, they call it the mixer rule, is another symptom of the entrenched bureaucracy. So everyone's talking about how great it is to have a president that's more friendly to Bitcoin, but these rules are pretty bad. They're called mixer rules, but I would characterize them more as basically outlawing spending, or at least making it very, very cumbersome to do so. They're so restrictive, they don't want to do address reuse, which is, mind boggling, because first off, that's a privacy nightmare. That means you can't spend a Bitcoin without doxing your whole stack to your counterparty. And then additionally, it's a terrible security vulnerability, because every time you spend from an address, you end up leaking your nonce, and the more you do that, the easier it is to guess your private key. So highly recommend that you don't do that. I think Americans need to call their senators, call your congressman. I know it's annoying. I know you may say it's cuck to participate in the political process, but if you consider this a war for Bitcoin, you don't want to just give up seed the seas because you have a badass army. I know that the technology is awesome and it'll keep evolving, but I think it's best to at least contest things like this that are out of control. And it's off brand for Trump. I think one of the main selling points for Trump should be, look, they just came after your family, they just debanked your family. This will be used against your family if you're not careful, and you should put the brakes on this ASAP. So that's kind of going to be my approach as I go to the BPI types and the people that have influence in Washington. Shout out to the Bitcoin Policy Institute for doing a lot of great things. I'm really hoping those types, alongside collective action with donations and calling your congressman, can help push back against these really stupid rules. Like, I just named one of them. There are like 5 rules. If any one of them went through, it would be really, really bad. But the worst one is just the address reuse one, which is insane. Like, that's not a mixer. No. Now I know that one of the FinCEN administrators kind of walked it back and said, oh, well, it's only for criminal activity, but it's also like, who decides who's a criminal? There are people that would gleefully label you a criminal for saying boys are boys. So I think we need to be very vigilant about this. We should be alarmed by this, and our Bitcoiner immune system should activate like immediately and make sure that this is not a thing, because it doesn't just affect, we can talk about how it affects plebs. We can talk about how it affects whales or individuals, but also affects businesses. Like, if one of the directives of the Trump administration is to make American Bitcoin mining more dominant, this type of rule actually makes it much more vulnerable to attacks from Korean hackers, makes it much more vulnerable to leaking trade secrets of how you're doing your Bitcoin setup, how you're collaborating with energy companies, sourcing energy. Like, it's just a bad look. It's red tape. It's off brand for Trump, which is why it's surprising. But then you realize that probably 95% of Washington is just this permanent swamp creature that just never changes, and there's just entrenched bureaucrats that Doge, which is a complete failure, just failed to remove.
Yeah, it's hard to stop this machine, and there's also a question of how much influence and difference a president can actually have if the money printer and the machine is anyways getting their way. Like, no, like, I don't know, like the system is so strong, we've built it so long already, that it matters to a degree who's in office. It's questionable how big those degrees really are, because Bitcoin also was really great under Biden. Like, it went up massively, the community got stronger, and everything was there. Like, there was choke point 2.0, like there was a lot of bad things that Biden did. But then it's like, yeah, like, to what extent will we anyways go to that Bitcoin way? And I guess the politicians can then just influence how smoothly we go to this Bitcoin world. Are we going on a rough patch where we are almost like enemies of the state, or are we going together with the state where it's smoother for those who hold Bitcoin and are advocating for Bitcoin? I think those are the only two ways, and this is a big difference. Like I kind of talked it low now, but I think that's a very important thing to fight for, to have a smooth transition to Bitcoin and not a rough one. When you look at it in general, how do you look on the 4 years that Biden had, and now the 4 years on Trump, and maybe even I don't know if you've have thoughts on that. Those first like almost 1 year of Trump versus the last 4 years, like now like 5 years ago, that Trump had in his first term. How do you look at that with the Bitcoin development also and the Bitcoin regulations?
Yeah. So I would say, Biden was clearly, pretty hostile to cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin in general. There was Operation Choke Point 2.0 going on behind the scenes. Full reserve banks, the least risky possible way of banking in Custodia was getting stonewalled because they were friendly to Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. So there was definitely a concerted effort to suppress things. I mean, the irony is that because they pressed things so hard and because Gensler was so antagonistic, they wound up getting the ETFs approved. So like that's like the silver lining and maybe even turning point of the Biden administration. Like this, in spite of all that, they couldn't, thankfully, like the common law system of the United States prevailed. And they're like, yeah, you can't just arbitrarily stop a spot ETF. Like they're going to happen. And so that kind of forced the hands of, formerly much more hostile entities. And I'd argue they're still hostile, but at least they're publicly less hostile in people like BlackRock having to kind of get on the Bitcoin train. And so maybe their calculation was like, we can't fully stop Bitcoin, but how can we manipulate it to our favor? So, that happened. That was the silver lining. Trump's been better, but, there's still, in the same way that there was the silver lining in Biden's era, the Trump era, there's still, they continued prosecuting the Samurai case, even though the Blanche memo, the deputy attorney general said, we're not going to do legislation by prosecution, but they allowed that case to go through and they let the rogue Southern District of New York just do whatever they wanted. And that was, luckily, because it pled out, it does not necessarily set precedent, but I think the Storm case is really bad for precedent. And I think that needs to get completely rewritten, because what people need to remember is this isn't about money. This isn't about, transmitting things. This is about the First Amendment. This is pretty fundamental. This is about the First Amendment. And that was the argument that the original cypherpunks made in Bernstein versus US, and they won. The United States government in the 90s tried to prevent encryption from proliferating by classifying it as an armament. So saying that's a weapon of war and you can't export it. So they proved them wrong. They printed it on a t-shirt and proved that it's just math, bro. It's just math. And if it's just math, code of speech. And I agree with that. I think that's the only approach that we need. And I think I am very disappointed that the Trump administration fell for that and allowed that to continue, and now is calling into question whether or not we even have a First Amendment beyond the Fourth Amendment arguments for privacy. Like it calls into question the First Amendment. And if you look at what the Biden administration was doing and what they were gearing up for had Kamala won, I think they would have done a much harsher crackdown on free speech, like what we're seeing in the UK. You look at the arrest of Pavel Durov, the Telegram creator. That's an affront on the First Amendment. Like that's what they're trying to do, is crack down on free speech. Make no mistake, that arrest in France does not happen without the United States State Department having approval. So I think that's a bad look. I think all that's a bad look. I think there needs to be like an extreme push for the First Amendment, for freedom of speech. And I think the way that it's just kind of fallen by the wayside in favor of some other agendas is alarming. And I think there has to be like extreme legislative action, technological action, like across the board to codify the First Amendment. And, because if you think about it, all Samurai did was take messages and retransmit other messages. They didn't touch money. They're not a money transmitter. but they were still classified that way anyway. And that needs to change. There needs to be better legislation. I think the Regulatory Clarity Act helps a lot with that. I think, if you're an open source developer, you got to be real careful when you're touching funds, when you're accepting funds, when you're running things as a business. But I think the silver lining is that if something like the Clarity Act gets passed, and then you wind up with the ability to create open source software and just release it into the wild. And, if people run it, they run it. If they don't run it, they don't run it. But that's their First Amendment right to free speech. So I think that's the direction things need to take. And once again, I don't think we should just cede the political ground just because our focus is on the technological. I certainly don't think we can ignore the technological. That really is the most important thing. But I do think picking up and calling your senator takes 5 minutes. Call them and give them a piece of your mind and tell them that you're going to donate to their opposition if they do anything that's hostile to Bitcoin.
I think being political active is, especially in the Bitcoin community, something that's hard, because people make that argument that if you are politically active, you're contributing to the system, and this makes the system stronger, and Bitcoin is there to make the system weaker. I disagree with that a lot, but I hear that argument here and there, because I personally think that the system is here, it's reality, it is what it is, and there will probably in my lifetime always be a system where we decide how we live together. And the system will be there if you like it or not. And so we probably have to we have to push this system in a way, in the direction that favors Bitcoin. At least do a little bit, even if it's just 1 degree, even if it's just 2 degrees, it's better off.
When it's all out war, you don't just say, I'm only going to fight this way. You adapt. That's how guerrilla warfare wins. And I agree that, there's a possibility of making the system much stronger. Definitely if you give the system your loyalty or too much of your psychic energy, it's a problem. But, there is value in saying, hey, this is the nuclear option. If you guys touch Bitcoin, then we're going to just vote you out. And I do think there's value in having, liberty-minded people run for office. I have a friend here who's, Iraq veteran, stand-up guy, went to Harvard, great guy. I'm looking forward to seeing if, and I know he's considering it. I won't say his name, but I think somebody like that would be great, because he's a stand-up guy. He believes in Bitcoin. He believes in what we're doing, and he loves his country. And that's the type of person you want in office to, at a minimum, slow this down. Because really, at this point, I don't think it's about making them do a strategic reserve. I could care less whether or not they do that. I actually think it'd be kind of funny if they didn't. Truthfully, it'd be kind of just desserts for me. But I do want to slow them down as much as possible and just buy as much time for Bitcoin as possible, because we're still not there yet. I think we really need more adoption before it's at the point where they can't touch it in a meaningful way economically.
I do love the watches from Coin Vigilante, but today I have a very special message, not from me, but from the CEO himself, Carlos from Coin Vigilante. Let's hear him.
To all the Robin Seyr podcast community, I'm Carlos Estrada from Coin Vigilante, and we're sponsors of the show, and we're going to give you a very special discount exclusive to you. 10% off your order at coinvigilante.com when you use Robin at checkout. We have really nice watches that you guys can buy right now for 10%. This is a transparency edition, beautiful watch. These watches are worn in over 55 countries and counting. This discount is just for you, exclusive to the Robin Seyr podcast. We have limited editions, we have limited productions. These watches come in very nice packaging, boxing material, and they are collector's item for Bitcoiners only. Enjoy the discount. Thanks for supporting the show and Coin Vigilante.
I finally and officially mine Bitcoin. This is is not just something to stack more Satoshis, but it's most importantly also to support the network. Individual miners are the ones that keep the Bitcoin network decentralized. And by the way, you get KYC-free Bitcoin. That's why I use Simple Mining. I get an actual proper Bitcoin miner. They set it up for me. They repair it if it breaks down. And most importantly, they let me choose the pool and even connect my own full node. I'm completely sovereign and I'm completely in control, and I can sign up with Ocean, no account needed. I just give them a Bitcoin address and then there's mining going on. No KYC, nothing. So if you're ready to mine Bitcoin, go to simplemining.io, tell them you come from Robin, and let's mine Bitcoin together. I want to tell you about something very special to me. It's called Microseed. If you hold your Bitcoin in self-custody, and you should, you know how critical it is to secure your seed phrase. You should not have them on paper. You should not have them on anything else than titanium. With Microseed, you can engrave your 12 or 24 word seed phrase, the entire seed phrase, onto a 1-inch small washer. Yes, just one washer. All 24 words on that one washer. You can hide that thing everywhere. And even better, you don't need to buy a new kit every time you have to get a new wallet. You can make unlimited backups because Microseed is not selling the washer. Microseed is selling the device that stamps the washer. So you get the full kit with the device, with the washers, with the hammer, with everything you need to get started today. And you can make with that unlimited amount of backups. Go now to microseed.io. Again, that's microseed.io to get your last backup tool you ever need. The most important thing for your Bitcoin journey is not buying Bitcoin, but it's how to keep them. And yes, you have maybe the right tools, but how do you actually go ahead and stick it all together so it's the most secure for you personally? Self-custody is a deeply personalized journey, and the Bitcoin way is helping you exactly finding that correct setup for you personally. They are also helping you with securing your own cybersecurity. And if you want to go one step above all that, you can even get a consultation for a Plan B residency. Go to thebitcoinway.com/Robin and you will get a 30-minute free consultation. I think we still have to fight for Bitcoin. We have a magical line, and the magical line is somewhere between like 4% to 10% of people that are intolerant about Bitcoin, and they will push Bitcoin to the masses. Maybe I should back up just a little bit to make you understand what I mean is, if we get, I always make that example, because it's very simple. If you have in a restaurant, if you have 4% or 5% or 6%, let's make it easy and conservative. Let's make 10%. If you have 10% of the world's population that says, I will only eat meat, and this is the only diet that I'm willing to eat. This forces naturally every single restaurant in the world to at least have one meat option. The same argument you can make the other way around with vegetarian food or with any food by that matter. Even if it, let's take it to an extreme. Let's say peanut butter. Like 10% of the world says, I only eat peanut butter. That's the only thing I want to eat for the rest of my life. Completely unhealthy. You should not do that. But let's make that example. If 10% of the world says, I want to eat a peanut butter dish. If you then have those 10% and a restaurant has, let's say, 1,000 people per month. If 100 people, 10%, come in every single month and say, oh, do you serve some peanut butter here? And the restaurant says, oh, I'm sorry, we don't have that on the menu. And they walk out of the store and don't eat there and leave their money basically behind. 10% is such a huge number for that restaurant that they will say, let's have a peanut butter option on our menu. And the same way I see it as Bitcoin, where if we have enough people that are so strong about Bitcoin that they want to adopt Bitcoin as their main store value, adopt Bitcoin as their main medium of exchange, adopt Bitcoin as the main unit of account, and they're intolerant about it. They go in a store and say, "Can I pay with Bitcoin here?" And the store owner says no, and you walk out and you're like, "Oh, sorry, I will find an option where I can pay with Bitcoin." At this point, every store, every merchant, every restaurant will say, "Oh, I better have a Bitcoin option." And we're not there yet at all. Like we are very far away from that. That's why we are so early. Like we are still like figuring out the store of value kind of a thing. And we then only can move on to medium of exchange and all the rest of things and slowly get to that point. And my main point is like, till we're at this point, we should never stop fighting. We need enough people to push the mainstream over the edge that Bitcoin is a normal option for every money on the world, where you can pay with it, you can receive it. It's very normal that I want to have Bitcoin so normal integrated that when you go to a new company and you work there, they ask you, do you want to be paid in the local fiat currency or Bitcoin? Like that's where I really want to get towards with Bitcoin. It's the same way if someone invites you for dinner, he will ask you, are you omnivore? Are you vegetarian? Are you carnivore? Like if you are invited to dinner, you should better ask that, because you don't want to serve something that he doesn't eat. And so I want to get those the same point with Bitcoin, and I think we still have a long way to fight for that. And so politically fighting, grassroots fighting, whatever fighting, building a company in Bitcoin, like whatever you're going to do, or just write an article. If that's all you want to do, just write an article, put it out in the world, talk with Bitcoin about talk about Bitcoin with your neighbor. Like this is the thing that we have to do.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, people say that Bitcoin's inevitable, and I think that's a cope. I think you got to fight for it every day, just like you fight for anything else every day. I think it's inevitable because we will fight and because it's worth fighting for, but it's not inevitable inherently. It's just code that runs out there. And if nobody decides to run it, nobody decides to defend it, if nobody decides to store their energy and their lifeblood in it, then it's worthless. And back to your point about just an intolerant minority, the United States Revolution, I forget the number, but it was something like less than 5% of the continental people actually fought in the war. And that's all it took to get rid of the biggest empire ever at that time. So, all it takes sometimes is a little bit. And, everybody, there's an inspirational speaker that I enjoy that talks about this, but he says, everybody looks at George Washington, says, I got to be that guy. But what people don't realize is that you don't have to be that guy. There were hundreds of guys that charged the fucking field and made a difference. And so you don't have to be George Washington, but you can be one of the musket guys. You can be a drummer boy. You can be one of those other guys that makes a difference. You could be a spy. You could be whatever fits your skill set. But I think pushing this forward, this is an idea worth proving a point over, man. Like people have died for much less impactful ideas. Like this is about not letting another man print money that you have to work for. Like it's about basically usurping planetary usury, planetary theft, planetary fraud. And it's about driving it out forever for Bitcoin. I think that's worth fighting your ass off for. So as you point out, all you need is an intolerant minority. And you're talking about kind of the market driven aspect of this. I hope it's purely market driven and there's no violence, obviously, but it comes down to just being resolute and just saying, I'm not giving this up, and I'm going to die on this hill. I don't care what the consequences are. I think that's worth it. And, that's biblical too. There's the concept of the remnant in the Bible.
It's an interesting point because I always just covered for me the market driven one, but there is the values, the war side of things, where we could even have some kind of civil war, some kind of revolution, and Bitcoin is by far the easiest and most convenient revolution ever in the history of revolution. If you think about like, you can run a node from your home. You can write some articles, write some ebooks, and have some podcasts, and just buy it. Like you don't have to go on the front lines and fight. You don't have to like go. You don't even have to go outside for that. Like I urge people to go outside and meet people on meetups and go to conferences, like do the things, but like just being an active participant in a revolution was never that easy. And I'm mind boggled by how few people run a nodes, do self-custody and do the good work that every Bitcoiner in this early stage should really do to get to this 5%, whatever the number is, to really push the mainstream over the edge.
It's a global insurrection against banker occupation, to borrow words from Max Kaiser. And as you point out, what's the worst? You know, you're not going to catch shrapnel. The worst thing that's going to happen is your liberal wine aunt is going to block you on Facebook because Trump likes Bitcoin or something. You know, like that's not that bad. Like you can do better. There are men that were sent to their death for much less, and I think you can handle it. So it's just time for strong men to create good times. That's really what it comes.
It's so fun. My aunt literally just yesterday asked me if I'm a fan of Trump, and I'm like, I wouldn't I wouldn't call myself a fan, but I'm also not like against him. And I'm in Austria, so like it's also his politics don't really touch me, so I'm not, I have that many opinions on that. But it was fun because she made that connection, Bitcoin Trump, which I'm like, why? Like, like it's great that he talks about it and makes that connection, and it makes a lot of headwaves because people look up to him that weren't in Bitcoin, and now they're like, oh, Bitcoin. Like he introduced Bitcoin for a lot of people. He orange pilled a lot of people. Like kudos to him for that. But then the mainstream media going ahead and saying, yeah, Bitcoin is up 100% in the last 12 months only because of Trump. And I'm like getting furious because yes, he's an important figure, but there are so many grassroots people fighting for this revolution every single day that you're just completely ignoring in that equation. And I'm getting mad.
Yeah, and as you point out, like Bitcoin's for everyone. Like obviously there are a lot of political reasons why this happened. Bitcoiners were a bit of a swing vote, but at the end of the day, it is for everyone. I think it behooves us as, you know, orange pillars to understand that and understand that the message has got to change. I think some of your previous guests were talking about that, and it's like it's for everyone, literally. You know, whether you're conservative, you know, the conservative case for Bitcoin's been made pretty assertively. Then there's also just like the progressive case, which is more like, hey, these bankers have like an exorbitant privilege that's completely unfair. All these people that are unbanked, all these people that can't spend, all these people caught up in oppressive regimes, and those are valid too. And I think it behooves you as an orange pillar with good judgment to not come off as a maniac, not come off as, you know, flippant like we often do, and to just remain calm. You know, put your ego to the side, and because this is more important than your ego, this is about the future of humanity, and just being able to say, hey, you know, I understand your perspective, you know, and listen calmly, and then say, you know, I actually think from your perspective, this is why Bitcoin is great, and just kind of show them from their perspective how things that they care about, Bitcoin fixes this, because it really does fix like a lot of things. And there's a high probability that you'll find something that person really cares about that Bitcoin can fix.
100%. You also mentioned about mining, that you're really excited that the block is now around the block with Bitcoin mining.
Yeah, you'll love to see it. I think, you know, I think competition makes us all better. I think Bitcoiners understand that. I think having block in there is great. It's really interesting, their approach. A lot of the other mining projects tend to focus on how much joules per terahash can we cram into this thing, you know, how low can we get it, I guess is the metric, right? And instead Block said, you know, what if we can attack the operational expenses by making things really modular and making them easier to replace, easier to upgrade, easier to scale. I think that's really cool. And then maybe later they'll tackle some of the more, you know, cutting edge of like pressing the issue, how low they can get the joules per terahash. And I think that's a foundation for success. And as an American, I love to see it being built in America, not having this massive risk of having a possibly hostile nation in China have too much control over the ASICs market. I think it's good for decentralization. I'm hoping that more countries follow suit beyond just Block. I think there's a lot of great companies all over the world that hopefully are looking at this and saying, maybe this is our time. This is our chance to make our mark in our region on Bitcoin mining. So I'm really excited about that. Hats off to Jack Dorsey for having the low time preference and balls to just go for that.
It's so important that we push forward for mining, and we know about the mining centralization for like there's two types of centralization in mining. There's the miners itself that are highly centralized within big complexes that controlled by big companies, mostly even publicly traded companies. And then there's the whole different kind of centralization with the mining pools, where the block template creation, all of that is kind of a problem. There is, and people ask me whenever I bring it up to newer people to Bitcoin, they're like, can then a miner control Bitcoin? I'm like, it's not that easy. so they cannot just rewrite the code or do the cap differently or something like that. But they could potentially make it harder for if they're getting bigger and bigger and there's no competition, they can potentially make it harder or even kind of censor transactions if there's lists and they are kind of accepted by everyone in the mining sphere, because they can decide who's gets into the block and who's not. So I like projects like Ocean a lot, and I like projects that are just challenging the status quo and making Bitcoin even more decentralized. So I know that I will never have any problems with transacting on my Bitcoin. And so getting Block and getting so many other companies involved, having many more mining pools, having many more mining devices to mine at home, having heated miners, have all different kinds of solar miners and lottery miners, whatever it is, if it contributes to the decentralization and security of Bitcoin, I love it. That's what we need.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, the world's broken and it needs strong men to fix it. And how do we fix it? Ideally, no violence. Ideally, it's you go and you build and you compete, and that's what Dorsey's doing, and that's why I love it. And that's why I encourage the world. The world needs more entrepreneurs. It's hard because the fiat game kind of stacks things up for big companies, but you're blessed with Bitcoin. If you're blessed with Bitcoin, you'll consider starting up your own thing, even if it's small, and making a dent in, giving your family, your community, and the market more options, fewer choke points. So just more broadly, philosophically speaking, I'm for that. And also just, I'm an AI entrepreneur, and that's something I think about a lot, is just the centralization, in the same way that you could have Bitcoin miners centralize around will I include this in a transaction or not? Will I block OFAC or not? You could have the same type of censorship and bullying happen at the AI LLM level, which is why I'm pursuing a lot of new architectures. I think there's a lot of groupthink in the AI market. I think part of that is just human nature. Part of that is probably by design. Don't think that these corporations and the government don't love having access to all of your data and all of your daily thoughts so that they can map them out against you. Don't sleep on digital ID. These are very dangerous developments, and I think that there's new architectures that I'm experimenting with. And look, I think the LLM stuff is great. It's a great tool in the toolbox, but people acting like this is a panacea, I think, are in for a rude awakening. And there's other models that are actually perform much better when we're talking about agents. We're talking about coordinating many steps. I don't have a fully public announcement yet, but I'm building agents that are 1/10 the cost of what it costs to run it on an LLM, and they perform at least as good, if not much better. So I think that's going to be the future of AI. I think as Bitcoiners, it behooves you to keep an eye on AI, because not only is it an incredible opportunity, it's an incredible threat as well. And I think it's up to us to just build a network of entrepreneurs, especially in AI, that are building their own models or building their own specialties, and then also just having like a network that transacts in Bitcoin. That was my goal from the start. I think some of the technology wasn't there, some of the market mindset wasn't where it needed to be in order to make that a reality. But I'm slowly but surely building towards that goal and finding these little tiny breakthroughs that end up creating something great. So hopefully by the next time I talk to you, I'll be able to lay more into that. But I think overall, like everything you do, approach it with a Bitcoiner mindset of skepticism and trying to wrest control from centralization. Try to do as much yourself as you can, and if you need help, then lean on your community and let them lean back on you. And once again, the world's broken, needs strong men to fix it. So step up.
I love that. I love that so much because there is this amazing combination of AI and Bitcoin. Those are huge. I don't want to even say trends. Like Bitcoin is the biggest financial revolution that's ever happened, and AI is the biggest information revolution that ever happened. And those two things just happen to coincide at the same time. Having those two things right now, right at the same time, at the same timeline, at the same time frame, I'm like, you have to look into both. And I'm always the advocate for look into Bitcoin. But maybe on a Bitcoin podcast, my messaging would be more beneficial for people because those who are already here, they already get why Bitcoin, or most of them get why Bitcoin is so important. Maybe the better message here is like, get as deep and as hard as possible into AI. If you already understand Bitcoin, you get the biggest financial revolution ever. It's a fork in the road of humanity. It will completely change how we think about the world and how we interact with the world. And AI will also do that, but in a different way. And you have to be educated on it. Like you cannot sleep on AI. Like you can't sleep on AI. And so I love that you brought it up because it's such a fascinating combination if you combine AI in your work and Bitcoin in the saving of your work. This will empower every single individual, no matter if you are the son of Jeff Bezos or you were a stranded kid somewhere in Africa. Like no matter who you are, you need to use Bitcoin and AI, and you can rank number one in the world. Like nothing is impossible if you put in the hard work and the determination with Bitcoin plus AI.
Yeah, totally. I mean, basically what you're describing is like stock and flow. It's like the stock is the Bitcoin and the flow is the AI. Ideally not just create wealth for yourself, but help fix a broken world and help create wealth for your community and for the world at large. So those are the goals, and I completely align with that. And I'm curious to hear from you, how you use AI in your daily life, if you're willing to share.
I can share, but what do you mean with stock and flow and Bitcoin and AI?
So the stock to flow, like the example you could use is gold. So it has a certain amount of gold, and every year it increases by about 2% just because of the way the market forces work out. That's like the incentive to go out and find new gold. It kind of levels out in that range. And so the stock is all the gold that's ever been mined, and the flow is the new gold that's being mined. So in the same way, there's Bitcoin, there's all the Bitcoin that's ever been mined. And then, we're at like, I think 1% or less flow of new Bitcoin being issued compared to what's already been mined. So, in the same concept, Bitcoin is how you store your wealth. Maybe AI or some combination of it, some way of using AI is how you get new wealth, but you store your old wealth in Bitcoin. That's more what I'm saying.
That's interesting. I was just very intrigued by the combination of the stock to flow model and this having with Bitcoin and AI. Like, of course, like I was well aware of the Bitcoin and stock to flow model. But like having Bitcoin and AI, they're like, that's interesting. But yeah, like, don't want to dodge your question. You asked how I use AI. I honestly use AI. In three main use cases. The first one is it completely replaced from 99% of all my tasks Google. Like I simply almost don't Google anymore. Like it's just like looking things up. And if I don't believe it, I Google again, and maybe find some things, or I ask it things. So it's just like, oh, like what is the percentage here? Like what do you, like, what is that? So like just like a plain, like I have a question and I want to get it answered. Google also gets better because now Google answers those questions with Gemini, which is also AI. So like Google kind of replaces itself with those questions with AI also. But I usually mostly use ChatGPT. That's like my go-to tool when it comes to AI currently. I know it's horrible for privacy and all the things, but like I kind of get there and I'm like, oh, it's very convenient. It's amazing. This is like the first bucket, how I use it, or like for what I use it. The second one is like just automation and like things that are way quicker to do with AI. For example, when I have a new guest on that I don't know yet, I let my custom AI model kind of summarize what I need to know about him. So previously I went ahead and listened to a few minutes of a podcast and was doing all of that. Now I just find 2 or 3 interesting podcasts that he did before already.
So do you use like a reused prompt or something? I'm just curious how you go about that.
Oh, I have a custom GPT. Like
GPT. That's what I. Okay, that makes sense.
So I have that custom thing. So like almost all of my tasks are currently on ChatGPT. Like almost everything is built on there currently. And then I just need to paste the name of the guest on there. It gives me the first few things. And then I put the few transcript where I'm like, okay, this was a good interview of his, or this was a good interview of his. Like, okay, where can we go deeper on that? And then it just gives me like, oh yeah, here you should, know those are like 10 questions that you could ask, because this is like the usual topics that he goes in there. This is like a topic that you should ask him because he usually doesn't touch it, but it would be interesting to hear his perspective on that. Some fun questions, like, is there a fun question I could ask him? And usually I don't even use the questions. But with the questions that ChatGPT figures out, I know what I can ask and know the direction, because I actually right now don't even have notes anymore. In the beginning I had notes for my podcast, and now this. So this is the preparation then for figuring out how to do the trailer, where to put the clips and all of that. Now, since February, I'll no longer do it myself. So now I have like the 3 team members that I talked before, but I know they use AI. I think I think Pablo, my video editor that does the main podcast that people are now listening towards, he uses a Notebook LM, but I'm not fully sure. I think Pam, who does the thumbnails, she also uses a lot ChatGPT, and I think Eric uses a lot of different tools. Like I think he is just like every time I speak with him, there's like many different tools that he uses. So I'm not sure how the whole process of the podcast works there, just because I'm no longer in the full detail there. And then afterwards, when we find with AI what snippets we take out, we use those snippets to put it in the front of the podcast, and we also use them for creating clips, because we have the whole data structure. And this is kind of the second thing, just like automation. And there's like many small things that we do. Then the third thing is the interesting thing. It got to be my first point of contact when I strategize about something. So if I have a new idea, or I have some interesting thought in my head of like, oh, I want to pursue this. For example, I'm starting live streaming within like 1 or 2 weeks. Like 2 weeks it is now, I think, where I will live stream every single Friday, and starting to do that. I was thinking about the best strategy to actually go ahead and start a live stream when I already have the existing podcast, when I already have the existing infrastructure. So basically used it to kind of for like a partner that I can bounce ideas off, because I'm alone.
I do that a lot too. I mean, I do that a lot. And, one of the things I do a lot is I say like steel man both sides of the statement so that I can kind of get both. And I think when you use it actively like that, it's actually quite powerful. I think you still have to be careful for certain kinds of bias, but that's like, it goes back to like being a curious Bitcoiner, like why it's so valuable and why we're kind of cut from a different cloth compared to a lot of other people. And it's like, I'll give you a funny example. I was trying to figure out whether Tom Brady really cheated by deflating footballs in the NFL. And I ran it through like the Steelman. I actually thought he was cheating, but it actually presented compelling. I pushed it and I kept asking it, and it looks like he didn't cheat because based on the stats, one of the stats that I had in my head was the Patriots like barely ever fumbled compared to other teams, which like that can happen, but deflating the ball makes it easier to not fumble, especially in cold games. And what I found was they actually continue even after like intense scrutiny and like league rule changes, they still continued that statistical trend. So it's like, okay, maybe they didn't cheat in deflating balls. Maybe that was all BS. Like I was kind of more on the side of it. It might be true, just knowing how ruthless their team is and how they like to bend rules sometimes. But the truth is that that's probably BS. And I learned that, I challenged my own conviction using ChatGPT by just iteratively asking questions and looking up stats and comparing them. And it made that process much faster. I certainly could have done that myself, but it would have been like a day project instead of like a 30-minute project.
And this is exactly what you just said. It's instead of a 1-day project, it's like a 4 minutes project. This is what I mean by information revolution. This is way bigger than the Google search engine moment, like way bigger than that. And so having the opportunity, the possibility to do something that otherwise took a day or maybe even like a solid week, do research and do it within like 1 hour, 15 minutes, like 20 minutes, whatever the time frame is. That's unbelievable. It's a moment when the tractor comes to the farm. Before 20 people had to work on one field. Now one person works on the field with one tractor and he does quicker and better work than the 20 people did before. This is that moment in history, and it will change everything and about how we work and what are we working on also.
Yeah, and it makes people like Jeff Booth look like a genius, saying, deflation's coming. And he's probably right.
He is a genius, man. He's so bright.
Yeah.
Really cool. I have one question that I asked actually every single returning guest of mine. And the question is, what have you learned outside of Bitcoin since your last appearance?
Have I learned? I'm going to have to think on this one. What have I learned outside of Bitcoin? Okay, we can talk about diet. So we're talking about diet before, talking about the carnivore diet versus the Ray Peat diet. So Ray Peat was a biochemist and nutritional science person, and he challenged a lot of assumptions around the food pyramid. Food pyramid, as we know, is kind of a scam. Carnivore people, what do they get right? Red meat is essential. Food pyramid's a scam. Seed oils are poison. They got all that stuff correct, but I think what Ray Peat really gets at is it's all about metabolic health. It's all about your colon lining. It's all about your thyroid dominating over your adrenal system. You don't want to be in a state of stress for too long. And I think that the carnivore diet, because it restricts sugars, actually creates a state of stress. If you look at a lot of the people that propose carnivore, unfortunately, a lot of them lose their hair, and that's a symptom, and also possibly even lose some of their vitality, infertility. So that's kind of like a symptom that there's something wrong. And so I would encourage people that are hardcore about carnivore, consider reading about the Ray Peat diet. A great entry point is How to Heal Your Metabolism by Kate Deering. And it goes into how and why creating the hormonal balance of your thyroid over your adrenal system is incredibly useful. Personally, I've been using it. I've been eating a lot of fruit sugars before I came on this podcast. I had a nice fruit snack, and I had, I balance it with proteins to make sure that my blood sugar is never dipping below certain levels and that my metabolism's always roaring. And I would say the basic principle of the Ray Peat diet is to play offense. Don't just play defense. Don't just try to kill yourself only eating meat or only eating certain kinds of foods. The Ray Peat diet is actually quite enjoyable. And it makes you feel a lot more vital, I would say. So that's probably the biggest thing I've learned since the last time we talked. So I think last time I was more gung ho on the carnivore diet. Now I'm more on the Ray Peat focused diet, which includes a lot of red meat, includes a lot of the great things from carnivore, but kind of adds to it.
Interesting. I love that, because there are a lot of Bitcoiners that are very focused on the meat aspect of it, and not doing anything outside of that. And I get that. I love meat, but I love some veggies. Like I love some fruits. Like they're great. I hope they're not bad for me because I love them.
Yeah, so from a Ray Peat perspective, like I had to learn what veggies are good and which ones are less good. And they say that ones that grow below the earth are better than ones they're above the earth, because they actually have an incentive to make you not eat them. They have things that are called anti-nutrients, so they can actually block vitamin absorption and other things. When they're from above ground, they can also foster growth of not so optimal bacteria. So check it out. I know you're an open-minded guy. At least check it out. At least talk to ChatGPT about what's in the Ray Peat diet.
So you're saying vegetables that grow under the ground, like carrots, are better than.
They're really good for your colon, for fiber, and they have nutrients in them. Potatoes are big. There's others that are not on top of my mind right now, but I would say like consider that book and consider like a ChatGPT conversation at least of what it entails and how it might actually enhance your health and your energy levels.
How do you look at fruits in general?
I think they're energy. I think obviously if you're not physically active, don't eat 10,000 oranges, but I think in general they're pretty good, and some are better than others. But you'd have to look into it and come to your own conclusion. But I think having fruits with things like coconut oil, which is like is turbocharges your metabolism, turbocharges your thyroid, things like that. Coffee is great for your metabolism for running it. But what a lot of people do is they drink black coffee. They don't put anything in it, and then it actually hypes up your thyroid, and then there's no fuel to burn in your body. And so you put yourself in a state of stress. And so a lot of it just comes back to putting your body in a state of stress and causing it to want to play defense and hang on to fat and not perform well. Whereas, what do you do to a Ferrari? We were talking about Ferraris earlier. You put gas in it. You got to put gas in it.
Interesting. I love bananas. I think, I don't know how good they are, but I love bananas. Banana and gorilla.
Bananas are good.
I love them. Really cool. We have an end routine in the podcast where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest actually is. And the previous guest asked you the question, are you all in Bitcoin? If so, why? If not, why not?
I am all in. I'm as all in as you can be. I put an asterisk there. There's like certain like minor parts or assets that you hang on to just because you have to, because of the nature of life. But I would say I'm about as all in as you can be. And the reason why is because I think there's like a moral imperative here. I think you can either vote for a system that steals from you and, more importantly, steals from other people and ruins their lives, or you can vote for a system that is pro-growth, pro-human, pro-liberty, and pro-prosperity. And that's what I choose to do. I see Bitcoin as, as I said, as an insurrection against banker occupation.
Love that. Man, Jim, I enjoyed our conversation so much. Before I let you go, where can people find you and ask you questions?
Yeah, you can find me on X, Uncle Jim 21. Same thing on Noster. DMs are open. Hit me up on email if you don't have either of those. Jim at Cascadr, CASCDR.xyz.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jim, for being on. And also thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening, for joining us today. As always, I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Bye-bye. This content is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute financial advice.